E. It started with an innocent gesture, or so I thought. My stepson Nick had been living with me since his father, Mark, and I got married 5 years ago. Nick was polite, reserved even, and I had always respected his boundaries. But everything changed the day I walked into the house earlier than expected. I had been at the store picking up groceries when I realized I'd forgotten my wallet. Rushing back home, I opened the front door and immediately heard muffled sounds coming from the living room. At first, I thought Nick might be watching TV, but then I heard a distinct female laugh, breathless and low. Something about it sent a chill down my spine. Quietly, I stepped closer. And there they were, Nick and his girlfriend, Emily, tangled together on the couch in a way that made my cheeks burn. My immediate instinct was to turn around and leave, to pretend I'd seen nothing. But then Emily saw me. Instead of panicking, she smirked. "Oh, hi there, Margaret," she said casually, as if she wasn't half-dressed in my living room. Nick froze, his face turning crimson. "We didn't expect you back so soon." I didn't know what to say. My voice felt caught in my throat and my hands trembled. Emily, on the other hand, didn't seem fazed. She leaned back against Nick, brushing her fingers through his hair as if daring me to react. "This isn't what it looks like," Nick stammered, finally finding his voice, but his guilty expression betrayed him. I cleared my throat, forcing myself to maintain composure. "I think it's time for Emily to leave," I said firmly, avoiding eye contact with either of them. Emily's smirk widened. "Why? Afraid of a little fun?" Her words lingered long after she'd gone, leaving an awkward silence between Nick and me. He apologized profusely, claiming it was a lapse in judgment, but something about Emily's boldness unsettled me. It was as though she knew something I didn't, and it gnawed at the edges of my mind. Days later, Emily showed up again. This time, she caught me alone in the kitchen. Her demeanor was unapologetically confident as she leaned against the counter, watching me intently. "Nick told me you were upset about the other day," she began, her tone dripping with feigned innocence. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. But also, you're overreacting. It's not like we're hurting anyone." I bristled. "That's not the point, Emily. This is my home and there are boundaries that need to be respected." She laughed, a low, throaty sound that made my skin crawl. Boundaries? Interesting choice of words. Her gaze lingered on me a moment too long, and I felt an uneasy heat rise in my cheeks. I tried to brush past her, but she stepped in my way. "You know, Margaret," she said softly, "you're a lot more intriguing than Nick let on. I can see why he admires you." Her words caught me off guard, and for a moment, I couldn't tell if she was mocking me or being genuine. Either way, it was unsettling. The days that followed were a whirlwind of tension. Emily's visits became more frequent, her behavior more audacious. She'd make comments that left me questioning her motives, her sly smiles hinting at an unspoken challenge. One evening, Nick invited her over for dinner. I considered saying no, but relented, hoping to keep the peace. Throughout the meal, Emily's gaze kept flickering to me, her lips curling into a knowing smile. I did my best to ignore her, but the air was thick with unspoken tension. After dinner, Nick excused himself to take a phone call, leaving Emily and me alone in the dining room. She leaned back in her chair, swirling her wine glass lazily. "Do you always follow the rules, Margaret?" she asked suddenly. I frowned. "What are you talking about?" She tilted her head, studying me. "You seem so composed, controlled, but I wonder what you're like when no one's watching." Her words sent a shiver down my spine. "Emily, I don't know what you're trying to insinuate, but I'm saying," she interrupted, her voice low and deliberate, "that maybe you should let go for once. Join us." The room seemed to tilt, her suggestion hanging in the air like a forbidden fruit. I stared at her, searching for some sign that she was joking, but her expression was deadly serious. "You're insane," I said, my voice shaking. She leaned forward, her eyes locked on mine. "Am I?" Or are you just afraid to admit you've thought about it? I stood abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. You need to leave. Emily's laugh followed me as I fled the room, her words echoing in my mind long after she was gone. That night, I couldn't sleep. Her proposition haunted me, stirring feelings I didn't want to acknowledge. The lines between right and wrong blurred, leaving me questioning everything I thought I knew about myself. The next time Emily came over, I was prepared to confront her. But what I didn't anticipate was how her presence would make my resolve falter. She had an undeniable charisma, a magnetic pull that made it hard to look away. Over the weeks, she continued to push boundaries, her provocations growing bolder, and somewhere along the way I stopped resisting. It was a slow erosion of my defenses, her persistence wearing me down until I found myself standing at the edge of a precipice, teetering on the brink of something dangerous and exhilarating. One evening, as Nick worked late, Emily came over unannounced. This time there was no pretense, no games. She stood in the doorway, her eyes blazing with determination. "I know you want this," she said simply. And in that moment, I realized she was right. My world had already shifted, the boundaries I'd clung to crumbling beneath the weight of my desires. What happened next is a story for another time. But let's just say it changed everything: my relationship with Nick, my perception of myself, and the life I thought I'd built so carefully. The consequences were inevitable, but for once, I didn't care. For the first time, I felt alive. As I stood in the silence of my room that night, the echoes of Emily's words and actions reverberated in my mind. I realized that life is rarely black and white. It's in the gray where the most significant choices and the most profound consequences are made. And so, I stepped forward into the unknown, ready to face whatever came next.